As we look into the future, I mean, we've talked about AI as a tool and something that is, we know, going to be pervasive in not only our media, but in other aspects of our lives. What other kinds of things do you imagine coming into the future? I imagine as a consultant with startups, you
Mhm.
come across a lot of interesting stuff, and I imagine there's a lot of it you can't talk about. But how do you kind of see the future of accessibility evolving so that we do get that equality, not just in the media experience, but in the daily life
Yeah.
experience?
Yeah, there's a good friend that I work with at Yahoo who's now at Google, and he's very strongly supportive of the AR side instead of the VR side of what technology can do, so that you can adapt your environment while you're moving through it to give you added information, certainly wayfinding and directions, translating other people's languages. And the one that I'm spending a lot of time on lately is sign language. It's a new higher bar to create technologies that can actually turn speech into ASL or BSL in Britain or ISL in India, and do it in a way that incorporates all of the nuances of facial expressions, body movement, the human side of it. Now, there already are, and will certainly be more signing avatars that are better than what you saw in early video games, but they're not there yet. But the notion that you could on the fly live turn speech into sign, right now humans are doing it. There aren't enough humans to go around to do this. And yeah, there's a cost there. But we, in this company I'm working with called Sign Up, working on adding sign to TV shows and movies that are streamed. We really started off with a opposition to the notion of using sonic avatars. We just felt like we respected interpreters, we're amazed at the work they do. We want to make sure that their jobs are preserved. Many interpreters are deaf themselves, and they use a two-step process. And then it was quite clear somebody's going to do it. Maybe our ethics and focus on the humanity, maybe we should get involved too, but hopefully in a way that is not harmful. First, do no harm. So we're looking at that now, as many others are too, obviously guided by deaf people who sign and parents who sign to their deaf kids and interpreters to really understand if this is going to be used, particularly on informational media or educational as opposed to entertainment, because entertainment is still tougher to transform. But, a straight out CNN report that someone really would prefer to have sign, okay, maybe an avatar could do not a good enough job, but a great enough job. And I guess if somebody's going to do it, we hope it's someone who cares enough. And so we're taking a look at it.
I'm hearing a recurrent theme in your approach to accessibility of context, understanding, nuance, keeping that richness of the experience there rather than stripping it down to sort of the core components of that. In your experience, has there been a bidirectional exchange of nuance? Have you ever had a moment where you gained something from somebody, from whether it's descriptive video or captioning or sign interpreting, that you've maybe experienced a nuance that you wouldn't have picked up as a seeing or hearing person?
Yeah, it can be quite delightful when you get that experience. Today, the people who write descriptions of TV shows and movies, and you can watch it yourself on virtually any streaming service, go into the menus, either audio menu or accommodation menu. And the really great writers who write descriptions of what's going on, often I'm delighted. It's like, oh, I didn't notice that. Oh, yeah, that person's the same person as that person. So that always delights. And then on the tech side, there's a company that was founded a few years ago called Be My Eyes, and it was developed for blind people. And the notion is a sighted person could volunteer and enter their phone number into a database. If a blind person needed help reading a document, a prescription, seeing what's in the fridge, they could call up a volunteer, hold up their phone, and say, "Hey, could you tell me what's inside my fridge?" And it went nuts. Millions of volunteers signed up to help. Hundreds of thousands of blind people use it on a daily basis. And then OpenAI approached Be My Eyes and said, "Hey, how'd you like to work together and create Be My AI?" It's available today for free on Android and iOS, and it is astounding. You could take a picture of anything, and the description it will give you is some of the most amazingly detailed and interesting analysis of what the picture was, and a blind person could turn on their screen reader and hear this analysis. And then, this is a friend of mine who's blind, was a beta tester. He pointed it at his fridge and said, "What's in my fridge?" And it described, the mayo and the bread and a few cold cuts and some other things. And then he said, "What could I make with these ingredients?" And it gave him a recipe of the things he could cook from what it saw in his fridge. And it's like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's such an incredible story to hear that kind of innovation coming out of a need from one community that can benefit all communities. And that's the great kind of stories to hear and see that cooperation and that collaboration between different groups. Are there any other organizations that you would recommend our listeners look into who might be interested in accessibility?
The field has blossomed tremendously, even just over the past 5 years. And I'm so glad to see so many great organizations springing up, both commercial and nonprofit. Of course, my former organization, the National Center for Accessible Media, is on top of this at WGBH. Out of Utah State, there's an organization called WebAIM that does an annual report on the state of the web on accessibility. Another great organization out of Austin, Texas called Knowbility, that's KNOWBILITY. They have some great outreach to startups, and they have an annual contest for accessibility. And then the commercial companies, we talked about alt text. One startup I'm working with is called Scribely, Scribely. And they started to fill the gap around missing alt text. And they set up a service, and you can send in your images. They'll have people do a really great job. And of course, they were disrupted immediately by AI. So now they're incorporating AI into their work processes. So if you look at Scribely, you'll learn a lot about this whole question of image recognition, human-based and AI-based. And they're doing great work too. There's some annual conferences that are full of the people who are doing the cutting edge work. One is coming up. Well, we'll be podcasting this in March, and it's in mid-March. Everyone calls it CSUN, CSUN, sponsored by Cal State Northridge Technology for People with Disabilities, and it's been going on for 30 years. Another one called M-Enabling, every October in DC. All the companies, the nonprofits, the users come together. Great sessions come out. And then an online conference for free called Sight Tech Global as a fundraiser for the Vista Center for the Blind and Visually Impaired in the Bay Area. And they do an annual conference that focuses mostly on blindness issues. They get most amazing technologists, innovators, and entrepreneurs to do talks online. They're all right now available for the past 3 years now. That'll be coming up again this December. And it came out of a friend of mine who was executive producer at TechCrunch, which is part of Yahoo, whose wife is blind. And he decided, I'm going to use all my TechCrunch connections and bring some really sharp people together to talk about the cutting edge of accessible technology. So there's a lot out there, that's for sure.